Sure. I'll go first. So I'm Dev. I am the founder of Spaceman Holdings, which is a Chicago-based firm. I'm a developer. I've been developing for about 4 years. I've worked with Qtum for about a year now, maybe a little less. And we built the Argonaut Toolkit project for the Qtum Hackahton. Alexi?
I'm Alexis. I'm a developer and I work at Spaceman Holdings with Dev and help build up the Argonaut Toolkit as well.
Alexi, how did you meet me?
So I actually met Dev at a hackathon. I attended my school's hackathon. I went to DePaul, and Dev was there actually representing Qtum, and he was sponsoring a blockchain prize, and my team worked towards that prize, and we actually ended up winning. So that's how I established the connection with Dev, and just through a whole mess of other things later on, I kept in contact and ended up getting a job later on. But I originally met him through a hackathon, which Dev was there representing Qtum. So that's kind of a little fun thing about this whole thing.
Yeah, so the reason Spaceman Holdings is because when I'm at those, so I do a lot of developer evangelism for blockchain, and I'll go to a lot of hackathons around the United States dressed in a full spacesuit with my space helmet. I think it's back there. And you can see the top of it sitting on top of my wall, wearing a full space helmet and doing blockchain workshops and teaching kids about blockchain, basically showing them that this is a career path that they can be interested in and pursue. So when we built out the company, it was kind of a natural extension to make that branding part of our company name and motto. Yeah, so Argonaut, Argonaut is a Greek myth. It's about a group of people basically sailing on the open seas or sailing the Mediterranean Ocean, dealing with a bunch of pirates and a bunch of monsters, pirates. It's a myth and a fable. But I really liked it because for me, the really cool thing about Argonaut is the ship, as it goes through, all the little pieces of the ship are replaced. And at the end, it's like, well, is it even the same ship, right? So if every time the ship breaks down and you replace a little piece of it, and it keeps being the same ship, is it still the same ship? And that's really how you look at blockchain code upgradability, which is we can keep upgrading the contracts and we can still reference them in the same manner. That's the way I thought about it anyway. And also just, I thought it was a cool name. Sure. So when we started a year ago, Qmix didn't exist, right? So we're part of the team that built out Qmix. So that was actually one of the most frustrating experiences we had working for a year in Qtum, was that we didn't have a Qmix-like platform to quickly deploy. Deployment on Qtum right now could use a lot of work. But with the workflow using Qmix and the web wallet, that's a lot easier. I will say it's still kind of, it's hard if you're doing anything that's not a web app. So if you want to do a mobile app or anything like that, I think that is still a pain point. But web apps, I think, have gotten much easier to use on Qtum. Alexi, do you have any frustrations working with Qtum?
No, I think you pretty kind of hit the nail on the head before Qmix kind of existed. It was a little bit of a pain, but now that Qmix is there, I enjoy working on Qtum. It's a lot of fun, and it does have a lot of kits and tools online to help out. But yeah, I think the main thing would be deployment. But aside from that, it is pretty intuitive and it has a lot of good things to work on and develop on and test on, which is nice.
I know that some of the problems that we ran into was with error code documentation, right? So there's stuff that I know how to mess around with in Qtum that I think the average developer wouldn't know, which is having if you have the logs open, you can kind of see what those errors are and you can interpret them a little bit. But those errors aren't fed back into the EVM compiler. Or rather, they're shown in the EVM compiler, but they're not fed back into an error code that you can read that actually shows up. For example, transaction fee failing, things like that. There's some transactions. For example, this is a thing that we ran into, and not just us. There were some other group members or other Hackahton members that ran into this, which was the SHA-256 function not working in Qtum. And the entire reason that is that in your Solidity compiler, you have to make sure that a certain flag is switched on, which is that you have to make sure it compiles only for Homestead. And these kinds of little bugs are fine, but there's no it doesn't exist in Ethereum because Ethereum is always very opinionated in one way. And then on Qtum is mostly the same with its EVM compiler, but where it differentiates, it's not documented really well. And so you have to do a little bit more investigating and trying to figure out why this is failing. And in the end, we work with the team members of Qtum, and so we were able to ask those questions and get those answers, and it all worked out. But I would say that's probably one of those issues. What I like about developing on Qtum is that I think the community is a lot easier to reach. Like the team members are easier to reach. If I have a question, it's easier for me to ask that question and get answers than it might be in other communities. Yeah, so the project name is called Argonaut Toolkit. I really like the two things that we focus on at Spaceman Holdings are governance and identity. I think those are like the two fundamentals that blockchain will really revolutionize, right? Regardless of whether you believe supply chain or cryptocurrencies or anything else that blockchain is good for, I think the two verticals in the blockchain space are governance and identity. And so the really nice thing about Argonaut that I really, really liked was we can now do a system of recursive namespacing. So namespacing is the whole thing, which is a nerdy thing to talk about. But like one of the big problems we deal in the world is when you want to talk to someone, whether it's a phone number or it's an email address or it's a website, all of those things are called namespaces, right? And so with websites, you go through a registrar like Namecheap or GoDaddy or whatever, and you register your namespace. Same with email, with the phone number. And then with the phone number, depending on which country you're calling from, if you're from the US, you have to add one because that is the namespace of the United States. And so namespacing is kind of a way that we build how to create authorization for users, right? How do we create an identity for a user within an organization, and how do we create an identity for that organization within a network of organizations? And so when we're thinking about building decentralized governance structures, when we're thinking about building global communities that span jurisdictions that aren't just, geographically defined, then we have to realize that there are going to be these kinds of questions as well. Who is supposed to be in charge of giving out those namespaces? How are we going to deal with that? And in the current context, all of those answers have been centralized authorities. For phone numbers, we have telecom providers. For websites, we use the international, it's called ICANN, which is actually a US-based organization and things like that. And so with creating a toolkit or creating kind of this organizational or decentralized name service, it allows you to do namespacing, not just for websites or things like that, but for people, for contracts, for applications in a decentralized manner, in a distributed manner, which is much different than the current context that we have today. Yeah, so one thing I think is really cool is that Qtum and QuantumX are being developed in parallel, where Qtum is the mainnet, and then QuantumX is that consortium chain. It's for enterprises. One of the cool pieces that we kind of messed around with, and so the reason we called it a toolkit is that it has a lot of modular pieces, and you can kind of use them as you see fit, right? So there's the organizational name service. And one of the other things that we kind of experimented with and played around with was actually using QuantumX as a side chain, where you can actually increase the throughput on the Qtum mainnet by using transfer gateways and then rolling out QuantumX as higher throughput side chains for those organizations. And so I think one of the most exciting features by building on QuantumX is that basically using that side chain feature set that I hadn't really seen QuantumX used for yet. Yeah, so like we mentioned, Spaceman Holdings is a development firm based out of Chicago. We take on a variety of different projects. Our hope, so the problem with Argonaut Toolkit is because it's built to be a decentralized and distributed, like basically here's some cool work that anyone can work on. There's not really a monetization method for it. But what we're hoping to do is we want to roll it as a research project. And so we're going to be applying for grants from places such as Aragon, which is a governance toolkit built on Ethereum, but they do a lot of really cool work in governance. And I think porting the Aragon framework to Qtum and then building Argonaut on Qtum would be really cool. So we're going to be applying for grants from Aragon. We've also reached out to Holacracy, which is the specific type of governance that we tackled in the hackathon. That was a very niche, specific type of governance that we tackled. And we're in talks with them to try to figure out if this is something that they want to pursue. So that's kind of our current roadmap, and we'll see what people say. So one of the things that I think Qtum should think about doing, or the Qtum Foundation specifically, not the Qtum mainnet, but the Qtum Foundation, other projects do this is basically expand your research department, or think about issuing research grants, right? So for example, Ethereum has the Ethereum Research Grant Project. Aragon does research grants, things like that. So I think one of the really cool things that I would like to see from the Qtum Foundation is to encourage projects that aren't necessarily business focused. Because when we build good open source tools, we will get good business use cases, right? Value creation is not just about money. And so I think one of the really cool things that Qtum can work on and encourage is more work with universities, more work with, scholarly programs to work on this kind of research. So personally, what I would like to see, if Qtum had a research foundation, I would love to apply this as a research grant instead of a business grant, but as a research grant, and maybe partner with a university like Illinois Tech. So that's where I go. They're in Chicago, and do a project where we figure out if there is a good model for organizations within Chicago or within the United States that would benefit from from this kind of organizational name service or name spacing toolkit. And if so, what are, building out those kind of use cases for those organizations. One of the really powerful things about our toolkit is for its use in the nonprofit sector, especially for a nonprofit sector that has a lot of different chapters, whether it's within a country or, internationally. And so that would be a great thing to just kind of go and talk to them and figure out what are their needs, and then see if we can bring those back to the platform.
Really, Dev hit the nail on the head, right? Because what was really big for me, right, before I even attended the hackathon in which I met Dev, I wasn't really looking towards kind of like the blockchain space as a space I was looking to get a job for, right? Even though I did go to the hackathon specifically to try to develop my skills and in order to increase my chances of actually getting a job later on, right? And so the fact that there was that project there to be able to incorporate myself into this space was really big, because all of a sudden, I went into the rabbit hole. I did the project and I really kind of got engrossed into the whole thing, and now I'm here. So I think Dev really hit the nail on the head, and that reaching out to universities, getting that research out to a lot of capable developers going to school right now, and making them realize that this is the really, really exciting space, and really like a space that has unlimited potential. And I think a lot of developers out there, especially in universities, are ready to tap that potential. All right. To finish off, I guess I just want to say thank you to Qtum for hosting this hackathon. I've never really been part of such a kind of large scale online hackathon. It was a lot of fun, and something that we were talking about before. The community is great. Reaching out to the people at Qtum is really easy, and they're always super friendly. So I guess what I would have to say is just a big thank you.
Yeah, so as Leslie mentioned, so I've never participated in an online hackathon before. I go to a ton of in-person hackathons, and I've mentored at a bunch of hackathons, but I've never participated in an online hackathon before. And so for Qtum to be able to entice me into doing that, that was a very interesting experience for me. And I really liked it because it wasn't just the weekend that I had to stress for. You know, it was a little bit more structured, and it was hectic because, of course, the hackathon is hectic. But the fact that I could go to sleep at night was fantastic, you know? And so thank you for putting that together. And I just want to reiterate, you know, one of the nice things that I like about the quantum community is that it's relatively easy to reach out and ask questions.